It's either the case we've all been waiting for, the case that could settle the debate once and for all, right? If it's true. Could you think of a more extraordinary, let's just say, hypothetically for a moment, it happened, as all the witnesses stated it happened. How big of a story do you think that is?
It's an immense story because it means that they're real. If it's true, that it means they're real. It means something that we don't understand was in the sky, got hit by lightning, got caught up in a furious lightning storm, and wound up crashing. And that these things survived and they got out, and the fact that one guy handled one of them and got this insane infection and died very quickly afterwards, and he was very young and healthy, military man. And the fact that all these people have the same story. They all have the same depiction of the disc, the craft. They have the same depictions of seeing these beings.
Not one witness came to us. We had to track down every one of those witnesses, and there's a story behind each and every one of them that I could go on for an hour for. I couldn't validate this, and I didn't put it in the movie. But if there's two doctors who are listening to this, apparently the creature was alive. The one that Marco Chirizi brought into Humanitas Hospital was alive. And according to Dr. Roger Lear's book, everything else was accurate. I can't say if this was accurate or not, but he put it in his book, so I'm assuming that it is. And Uba Dejara won't talk about it. He's a witness. There were two doctors that claimed telepathic communication with the live entity. And that's in his book. Now, I'm not telling your audience that that's true. I'm telling your audience that it might be true. We know that that entity, that creature, that being, that ET, whatever you want to call it, went to Humanitas Hospital. We know that because we have testimony from the people that took it there. We have testimony from people on the inside that claimed it was there. But we don't have any testimony from the doctors that claimed there was a telepathic communication.
Do they talk at all about what it said?
It said that they felt sorry for the human species, not realizing their potential of who they really are. Like they're not. We don't realize as a race who we really are. That's what they said. It's in his book.
Greetings and welcome to Ancient Library and the 1996 Varginha UFO crash and alien contact case. A very bizarre case with, in my opinion, a very compelling progression of events and seemingly without people involved who were seeking attention or sensationalism. More the opposite. A few words on the structure of the video before we start a deep dive on this, in my opinion, very magnificent case. So at first I'm gonna give a detailed presentation of the events happening in chronological order, proceeding to dissect the case and cover all important points, followed by some theories and how this case fits into the bigger picture. And in the end I'll give you my quick personal synopsis about the case. So let's jump right in with Chapter 1 of the 1969 Varginha UFO case. Chapter 1. The crash. So the first event happening based on witness testimony is a sighting of a cigar-shaped UFO with the size of a school bus, descending from the sky while emitting smoke and visible damage. The main witness goes by the name of Carlos de Souza, who has seen the UFO crashing in a nearby field while driving home from work. Mr. de Souza immediately checks out the scene as he recognizes a few peculiar things. First one is a strong ammonia sulfur-like smell, which is described as incredibly strong and long-lasting. We will pick up on this characteristic scent later. Second thing is he sees that there's a lot of debris on the field and on the crash site. One bigger piece and many small ones, which are resembling an aluminum type of material. He picks up a piece and crumbles it with his hands, but after a short time, it's going back into its original position, into its original form. So keyword memory metal. A few moments later, military personnel arrives and tells him immediately to leave the scene, an order which he follows as he proceeds to drive to a nearby gas station to have a coffee and relax after this rather exciting happening, which he at that point classifies as something along the lines of a secret military program. What can be mentioned here as well is the conversation he has shortly after his coffee. Two military or man in black type of people told him that he saw nothing that night if he don't want to get into trouble. And this particular person, alleged to some sources, was not talking about the case for almost 3 decades. But we're gonna pick up on this later. Chapter 2, Military Activity, Part 1. 7 days later, we're talking the 20th January 1969, military activity was present in Varginha. Witness reports about random blockades and enhanced presence of military forces were active in town for undisclosed reasons. It was at this time that the first news reports came in about the alleged sighting of a bizarre creature which was encountered by 3 girls. The military allegedly shut down the press and was trying to control the narrative already at this point. Chapter 3. The Being Encounter. So it was January 20th, where 3 girls of the age of 14, 16 and 22 walked over a little grassy place nearby a street nearby the place where they lived, and encountered a strange creature sitting on a wall, locking eyes with one of them. The creature was described as about 4 feet tall, with brown oily skin, big red eyes, 3 small horns on the forehead, and of course the intense sulfur ammonia type of smell which was present in a very intense manner. The creature made no sound or noise, and the 3 girls said it looked weak, wobbly on their legs, and they said they sensed an emotion of fear from the creature. But there's no talk about telepathic communication at this point. You can see the artwork which the 3 girls determined to be the most accurate picture or resemblance of the being they encountered. We will later analyze and expand on the whole beings part of the case, so stay tuned. The 3 girls ran in fear back home to their mom and told their story. They told their mom they saw the devil outside. The mother also noticed the smell, so I think the place where they lived and the street is not so far away when even the mother was noticing the smell at that time and space. Chapter 4. The Capture. About 3 hours later, 2 military police officers drove around the area of the aforementioned encounter to look out for something unusual. After a few moments, the creature suddenly crosses their path. One military police officer, which goes by the name of Marco Cirisi, grabbed the creature and restrained it with his bare hands. Even after he was out of the presence of the creature, the strong, disgusting smell wasn't going away. Additionally, Marco Cirisi developed a mysterious infection shortly after, which was shutting down his immune system, according to the doctor who was taking care of Mr. Cirisi. The infection, according to him, the infection was something he has never seen before, and he could not do very much besides trying to minimize the symptoms. Mr. Cirisi died after a few weeks later due to his infection from an undetermined cause. Multiple witnesses, including the doctor and Mr. Cirisi's girlfriend and sister at the time, are corroborating the aforementioned events. According to a multitude of reports, another creature was captured at the same day a few hours earlier by the fire brigade of Varginha. The fire department received calls from concerned people reporting on a strange creature in the area which is connected to a forest. The firemen arrived at the area, spotted the creature, and catched it with a net. Witness reports from people observing the incident and speaking with the firemen were saying that they caught a wild animal which cried like a child. So the general narrative at this point wasn't even the idea of alien beings. People thought more of a demon or rather a wild animal. So to recapitulate here quick, 2 beings were allegedly caught that day. One by the fire brigade, one a few hours later by the military police, like Marco Cirisi, the guy who developed the infection. These events, the 2 captures, were confirmed and corroborated by all kinds of witnesses working in many areas at that time and space. At least one creature seemed to be still alive at that point and was transferred to a hospital to conduct x-rays, etc. The radiologist also gave his testimony about the events, and we will pick up on that in a later chapter. I'm trying to keep things dense, compact and in chronological order here, so we continue with the next chapter. Chapter 5. The Second UFO Sighting. Close to the area of the second capture, I should say, a family reported a UFO sighting. A disc-shaped UFO was hovering over the nearby streets and seemed to conduct something like a grid search for at least 15 minutes. Several members of the family saw the UFO and they said it made no sound and it got some red lights on it and it was like seamless metallic disc-shaped craft. And they watched it for minutes. They gave testimony in documentaries without showing their face, and according to filmmaker James Fox and his team, the family members needed to be convinced for some time to finally tell their story to the public. The main witness also said he was excited that God gave him this opportunity to see this craft, to see this UFO. A phrase which holds some water in terms of personal significance of an extraordinary event of that kind that it maybe really happened. 1 week later, the family got visited by a group of people which asked them detailed questions regarding their sighting. They said the people were dressed like normal civilians and got an American accent. They were accompanied by a Brazilian UFO researcher, I guess he would translate things. and they told the family that the conversation never happened. Some researchers think it was maybe an old type of format of a UAP task force at that time. The family is 100% compelled that the Varginha case happened. Chapter 6. Military Activity, Part 2. So after the two beings were allegedly captured, one of the creatures was brought into a nearby hospital, and according to testimony of the radiologist, a military truck and a lot of other police cars were parking outside and requested x-rays of something in a black zip body bag. They exactly told him which parts they wanted to be scanned: the skull, the spine, the abdomen, thorax, pelvis, legs and arms. The military men were closely observing the radiologist, and there was an intense tension in the room. After the x-rays were developed, he wasn't able to check and see. They were immediately taken by the military. Quote, "Normally, I verify if the images are correct, but on this day, I didn't verify them. It wasn't allowed by them." One military man told him, "Your work is done, and don't comment on what you saw and what you did here." He also described the strong smell, a mix between sulfur and ammonia, and even despite intense cleaning, some areas of the hospital had to be shut down due to the intense smell. At about the same time, the military, accompanied by the Navy, was very active in the area. Military personnel gave reports of an alerted, busy state, and witness accounts about military personnel which is driving in a small convoy through the area. One military witness reported seeing a metal box transferred into a Navy truck, and rumors going around that the Navy went to Varginha to pick up some creature. The military witness also reports that his whole squad, which was involved in the so-called secret mission, was split up shortly after, and all the members got put in different areas, cities or military bases. So at this point, we are talking 21st and 22nd of January 1996. In more recent times, researchers and filmmaker James Fox were able to find an ex-military who allegedly drove one of the creatures around and was given his testimony anonymously. And I will now proceed to present his account as it fits into the reconstruction of events happening I'm presenting right now. So the military witness, we might call him Military X at this point, was stationed at a military base, about 20 miles away from Varginha. At about 9 in the morning, he was called to the office and got instructions to prepare some vehicles for a secret mission. And the destination was the city called Varginha. He was ordered to follow some certain unmarked vehicles first to the regional hospital and second to Humanitas Hospital. There were a lot of military personnel from the group S2, which is, according to Military X, the Brazilian Army's secret service. Arriving at Humanitas Hospital, he was ordered to park the truck at the back gate. He arrived at the gate, and inside he saw medical staff, military personnel, and a stainless steel table with an open box on it. He saw parts of the creature. The lower half was exposed. So he saw the feet, legs, etc., and acknowledged the brown oily skin and the fact that he was seeing something different, a not known creature or animal that he ever saw. He described the skin texture as silicone-like and the high tension in the room, and that he was scared. He describes the foot with like 2 prominent toes. I'm gonna put a picture on the screen right now. After some time, Military X was ordered to leave the room, what he did. At this point, he saw military men with camera gear and also claims that the military got physical evidence and video recordings of the creature. After some time, he was ordered to transport the creature back to the ESA military base, in which it stayed overnight until the 23rd of January 1996. The next morning, the convoy was driving from ESA military base to Espesec's army base in the city of Campinas, about 200 miles southwest from Varginha. Chapter 7. The Last Traces. Military X doesn't know certainly what happened to the creature after that, but he heard rumors in military circles that it went to the United States because of better equipment to do studies. There's an interesting testimony from a Brazilian Air Force traffic control officer, José Manuel Fernandes, who claims that his unit was responsible for monitoring specific airspace over the state of Sao Paulo. At that time, he was informed that an US Air Force airplane was landing in Campinas. 2 helicopters took off from Campinas airport to an unknown place, which we later learned was Varginha, collected something and returned to Campinas. They put it into the USAF plane and it took off and left. He was told, quote, total silence about the incident. And a few infos he gave, he was saying the Americans were leading this operation, this so-called secret rescue operation, and the Brazilians only supported on the ground because it was in their area. And that the US Air Force plane landed without authorization.
And the plane lands without authorization from the Brazilian government, and it lands in Campinas. And then the helicopters go from Campinas to Varginha. And then they go from Varginha back to Campinas. They load something on the airplane, and the United States Air Force takes off again, all without any authorization from the Brazilian government. And that's what these guys are saying. Every single military person that we met with, we put a lot of little nuggets in the credits at the end, they all said the Americans were involved. Because I didn't know. When I went into this, I had no idea.
Isn't it fascinating that they would listen to us?
It's absolutely fascinating, and I want them to come forward. People on the U.S. side, come forward, please. We need your testimony. This is the case that could solve this riddle once and for all. How do you walk away from a case like this if you think it's true?
If you think it's true and you're you can't. I mean, you can't. You must be
can't.
compelled. It's so important.
You can't let it go. You can't put it down. It's just like you have no choice. Like, what am I going to do? I had this guy walk up to me one time and he goes, "Why do you do what you do? You're so compelled. What gives?" I said, "Well, let me ask you a question. If there was tangible evidence being withheld, I'm not saying this is a fact. I'm just saying hypothetically, if this was going on and if it was being kept in the general public, that there's evidence that suggests we're not alone, how significant of a story would you give that?" And immediately he's like, "Oh my God, if that was true, that would be the most important thing ever. I mean, that's what we all want to know." And I was like, "Well, I'm convinced it's happening. So how do I walk away from it?" It's almost like what you love kills you, you know?
Well, I don't think it's killing you.
Well,
I think
almost did with Eric Lopes.
Well, yeah, that was a sketchy scene. I think it's important, and I think you should be praised. And I think that if this case is real, and if these people are telling the truth, and my God, it certainly seems like they are, it's unbelievable. I mean, the confirmation that what's fascinating to me is like that there's a lot of variation in these things. There's a lot of variation in these experiences, a lot of variation in these crafts. And you got to imagine there's probably not just one world that's
what I was
interested
thinking.
in us.
That's what I was thinking. It could be all of the above.
It could be many worlds that are interested in us.
Such a huge universe.
It's impossible to even wrap your mind around how big it is. And if something out there is like Earth, where intelligent life has evolved to a very significant point, but then keeps going for 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 1,000,000 years. What if they live in a more stable environment where they're not getting pelted by asteroids like we are?
Neutralize the aging gene.
Yeah, what if they
Stop
figure
the aging
something
process.
out where they're not subject to the same biological ailments that we are? What if they incorporate some sort of technology into their physical bodies? And that's them. What if they're a hybrid of artificial intelligence and biological life? Like, there's so many possibilities. So many possibilities. I mean, it's almost impossible for us to even imagine the variations that could be out there, because you're talking about a truly infinite universe. And the areas, they've already identified Goldilocks planets, more than one, multiple Goldilocks planets in the known universe.
So now, after you got the material presented, I will dissect the case in the following key points: the crashed UFO and the intense smell, the beings, the mysterious infection, the immense scale of military activity and potential existing evidence, witness testimony, and witness suppression. So let's start with the first event, which allegedly caused all the following ones in January 1996. The crashed spacecraft. This scenario reminds me of something what resembles a typical crash retrieval. We got one critical witness and a few secondary ones, which saw the craft or heard an impact. Allegedly, NORAD was warning Brazilian authorities about UFO activity near Varginha at the time the UFO crashed. But take this with a bag of salt. We also got a pretty good description of the craft. It was cigar-shaped and of a school bus size. A guy who witnessed the event on the road while driving and immediately got there and picked up some memory medal type of thing. And shortly after, military people appear and order him away from the area. What's critical for me at this point is the fact that the intense smell was already present at this time in the area, and could it be that due to the lack of protection gear, the ETs got literally melted by our atmosphere, creating the oily skin and the pungent smell, creating chemical reactions, maybe the same way we would dissolve in a more or less strong acid solution. You get my point. Or it can just be the natural state of the beings and it's totally normal on their planet, and vice versa, they sense something similar intense or disgusting in their senses while on our world. So maybe there's just a huge broad spectrum of intelligent life, which is so diverse and strange for life which is located on the other edge of the spectrum. Or maybe they aren't even far away from us, talking of the aforementioned spectrum, and even the potential distance between our habitable planets or worlds. Who knows? The beings. So let's elaborate more on the reported creatures or alleged ET beings. I've already presented the visual features: brown oily skin, big red eyes, about 4 feet tall, mostly silent, but there are 2 reports of the beings making noises. First, where the fireman captured one with a net, it screamed like a child, and second, some witness reports a chirping sounds like crickets. And there are some wild reports that the living being was communicating via telepathy with scientists or military people who captured and investigated it in Brazil. There's no data on when it certainly was moved to the United States or how long the being was alive in the first place. It seems like there were at least 2 beings alive after the spacecraft had crash landed and fled the scene, but it's possible that there were more occupants of the craft who maybe died on impact or were captured by the military at the spot right away.
Did you get any sense from any of them whether this being was a biological entity compared to possibly being some sort of robot or humanoid sort of drone or clones? Because you think when these creatures visit us, if they're coming from someplace far away, similar to the way we look at Mars, we send robots. Like, why would they come here themselves?
So there's so many unanswered questions. But according to the witnesses that I interviewed personally, that being was a sentient being. It had emotion, it had intelligence, it had fear, it had it was cowering, it was scared, it was non-threatening, it was scared, and it was feeble and having a hard time. So, I mean, it's kind of sad, you know, when you think about it. I started thinking like, gosh, you know, how did they treat this thing? You know, were they kind to it? Did they try to make any kind of communication? What did the authorities do? How long did it live? Did it live for weeks or days? I just wish I knew, you know? I need to find the counter, like once it left the soil, the Brazilian soil, and we have very compelling testimony that it did. What happened to it? Was it alive?
How long did it live?
How long did it live? Was there any level of communication with it? You know, all these questions I have unanswered. I'm just dying to know. And I'm going to continue researching this case in the United States because I'm going to start finding out. Well, I know I know of a bunch of evidence, photographic evidence, videotaped evidence, filmed evidence, and now physical debris evidence with bodies. I'm very confident that some unknown government agency or outside government agency, whether it's an independent contractor for the United States government, has got this stuff. Now, my objective moving forward is, where is it and who has the authority to release it?
The mysterious infection. So a very peculiar and sad part of the story is about the man who allegedly captured and restrained one of the creatures with his bare hands. Marco Cerisi, a military police officer who took action on the spot while encountering the creature with his colleague. There's no exact data on how long the so-called incubation period, that's the time window between the actual infection and the presence of the first symptoms of any disease, is in this case, and I'm not an expert in biology, but it seems like it was more a bacteria rather than a virus. Nevertheless, I guess a Earth human's immune system is not able to defend against any viruses or bacteria coming from life far away in space. The sister and girlfriend of Mr. Cerisi were very vocal about the situation and admitted that they were getting pressured to not talk about the incident. There are plenty of paths on which one could speculate on why only he was getting sick. I mean, he got very close contact to the creature and nobody else, even the fireman who captured the other being, stayed healthy. And as far as I know, Marco Cerisi was, besides the one being, only person who died due to the circumstances of this bizarre and deep case. People don't just die because of nothing, especially no healthy young man in his best years. Evidence, witness testimony, and witness suppression. So in this case, we got a lot of witness testimony and very little hard evidence like photos, videos, or parts of the craft, at least in the public spectrum. Many ex-military personnel were speaking out on the case independent from each other. They were mentioning things like the purgent smell and corroborating all types of events, like military activity, the part at the hospital, and the countless reports on the 2 spots where the beings had been captured. I'm pretty sure there are pictures, footage, and medical data, like for example the X-rays, and samples in hands of some secret military database, maybe in Brazil, maybe in the US, most likely in both. Maybe in the future, whistleblowers are able to leak the data to the public and corroborate the validity of the case even more. Many of the involved witnesses needed to be convinced to give their story. Nobody was screaming for an interview or was trying to get attention. Remember, it's 1996, almost 3 decades ago. A totally different world. Maybe this was due to the visits from men in black type of people, which many of them reported shortly after the happenings in Virginia. The guy who was first at the crash site was allegedly not speaking up on the matter for more than 20 years. This was the same case with the colleague of Marco Cerisi, who drove the car that day, and if this is all real, he witnessed very mind-blowing and disturbing things firsthand and also was able to escape a certainly deadly infection. Military activity. So this whole case starts with military activity and ends with it. It's exactly how one would imagine the progression of events of a textbook crash retrieval in another country as the USA, which is supposedly leading the West UFO alien disclosure world. So in most reported cases of UFO crash retrievals, US troops land and operate in distant countries and in the most cases secure and handle everything connected. And this take seems very logical to me and is supported by countless whistleblower claims, etc. Also the ridiculous claims by some officials and military leaders, which are found on pages like Wikipedia, in which the being encounter is claimed to be a drugged out homeless man with a creepy appearance which goes by the name of Mudinho, belittling the ability to sense things from the 3 girls, which weren't kids at the time, just young girls. One was even considered an adult by age, so this is a very weak claim, which just can be called disinformation, and an attempt to control the narrative. We will elaborate more on the things critics and skeptics say about the Varginha case. The high activity and presence of seemingly alerted military, army and navy people, not even including USA or US Air Force troops at this point, speaks for a bigger event or events than a homeless man scaring girls. Several military people and a flight traffic officer made statements of USAF troops landing without authorization and doing a quick operation. It's not even a speculative path with these statements at hand. And it's the most logical as well. Speaking of speculative, let's move to the next section, which is called Theories and the Big Picture. So there are a lot of descriptions and words thrown around in the early developments of the case. Things like the aforementioned homeless Mudinho or the fact that some people thought it was the devil or a demon. So pretty natural to try to put unknown things into boxes. But it's almost 30 years later and there's a pretty good access to data through the internet right now. The bad part is that it's nearly impossible to get serious first-hand data for the case. In most scenarios, we have to trust other people who have done the investigation on the spot, so it's kinda hard and unrecommended, at least from my side, to crystallize your take and run with it close-minded. But we can theorize and speculate about the case with the presented data we have access to. So my theory is that this spacecraft was either shut down or crashed without malicious intent from other sources than the nature. Or maybe this craft wasn't the most advanced one around in space. Maybe there are civilizations who are on the verge of using faster than light travel for the first time and make errors in their path of development, same as we have done with all kinds of things. We can be pretty sure that this landing or stop on Earth wasn't intended by the creatures, due to the nature of the crash and the fact that even more advanced beings than us can be very weak in the wrong circumstances and environment. So this could be described as a tragedy in their culture, and it's also to add that the second UFO report was a disc-shaped UFO with red lights, which allegedly conducted a grid search in the area where at least one being was captured. So seems like in rescue missions, with a different kind of craft, which is maybe designed for such ground operations, so it looks different and is maybe capable of more adequate things for such a mission. It's also possible that another civilization, maybe in a Galactic Federation type of scenario, was present and conducted a rescue mission, which would enhance the take that these brown red-eyed beings are kinda new in space and not capable of such a rescue mission in the first place. You see, we could go for hours here, and please tell me what you think has happened in Virginia in January 1996, and your theories, doesn't matter how far out there they are. So, my synopsis. So let me give you my quick synopsis on the case. I think this case actually happened and most of the events are somewhat logical in progression throughout the case. I can see people saying things like there's no evidence, just use Occam's razor. But I think Occam's razor is not working if you got a force working against the narrative. So in other words, it's only accurate if all people would be 100% pure-hearted and were never lying about things. But that's not the case. If you got a potential government or military force trying to control the narrative and suppress genuine information and witness testimony and holding back evidence or maybe even destroying evidence to keep the truth out of the public and make people run with stupid narratives, like all these events were happened because a homeless, white-looking man who scared a bunch of girls. So plausible deniability and every other person who is claiming other things will be called a nutcase. I think this case is a very important one in the ufology space. Many people are not even looking into it due to the wild nature of events and the graphic artwork, which I used as the thumbnail, by the way. So people don't even think a minute about it and discard it. But what would be the motive of creating such a case with all these details and corroborating events by so many people? I think the forces and energy which was used to suppress or change the flow of information regarding the case speaks for itself. Nobody was aiming for money or story, most likely more the opposite. People were offered money to not speak anymore about the case. So I'm pretty convinced it happened. But like I mentioned before, I'm open for any new information and I'm ready to increase my knowledge and therefore we can call it judgment about the Varginha case. So to wrap this up, I will give you some sources and recommendation regarding the case. So at first I will put anything mentioned here in the description as I always do, and please remind me if I forget something in the comments. At first I want to mention the relatively new documentary by James Fox, Moment of Contact from 2022. From which I used a lot of screenshots in this video because the inexistence of any video or real picture, it would be hard to visualize the case in a YouTube video. Maybe one day we can use it with AI easy to recreate everything in a high quality movie format. It's a great documentary and it was up on Amazon Prime, but it's nowhere near to find there anymore. They don't even want the money for this documentary. But it's up on YouTube on multiple channels in great quality and in multiple languages for free at the moment. Additionally, there are a few videos from archives showing the 3 girls interviewed by no other than John E. Mack, a famous Harvard psychologist who researched alien abductions from all over the world and wrote books about it. May rest his soul in peace. He died from a car crash in 2004. And more older interviews in Portuguese with witnesses and military personnel with subtitles. One thing I want to mention here is that Brazil got many UFO cases throughout the whole of the country. And that is just one more famous one which wasn't really much recognized around the world pre-Moment of Contact, which was released in 2022. So there's a lot more to uncover in this mysterious land in South America. So we reached the end of the program. Thanks for watching and all the best. LIBRA.
So that's an incredible case, Stephenville, Texas. Did you find the audio recordings?
Yeah, which I've actually found a couple of them. And
yeah.
Which one specifically?
They'll say so-and-so took a photograph of it. Oh, sorry, of the, it's the 2006 O'Hare UFO incident. It's phenomenal. I'm trying to remember the name of the gentleman, John something, that wrote the article. It was exploded all over the headlines.
You are so good at recall with all this stuff. You can really tell that you've been obsessed with this for so long. It's so fascinating to watch your mind like go through these cases and remember all these details with barely even looking at notes. It's all just...
I have, every time I get up and I do something like this, Joe, I'm representing all the witnesses that have trusted me. Sorry. I'm representing them. So, when I hear Dr. Kirkpatrick say what he said, it's a personal assault.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, he's just dismissive. When I hear the government dismissive of this whole thing, I'm thinking to myself, I take it personally. Because when I'm out there talking to people like you on these platforms, I'm sorry, it's just tense for me. It's like, I represent these witnesses. When I'm a voice for them. I come out here and I represent them and they trust me. And that means a lot to me. So, sorry,
No, I get it. Listen,
it's
man.
just like...
You're passionate about this. It means something to you, and that's one of the reasons why your documentaries are so good.